Farmers are, for the most part, very humble people, and they just want to do their job, and they just want to raise a family, and they don't typically like a lot of publicity. They aren't very good at telling their story, and they're even worse at showing their story. But we're at a time in history where to just do the right thing and to produce quality food and to raise a family and do all that, if you aren't telling your story, somebody's going to tell it for you, and the people that are going to tell it for you probably don't have your best interests in mind.
Alrighty, everybody, here we go one more time with how to farm. Again, this is simply a series that I'm making, trying to help out folks who don't truly understand a whole bunch of things, but what a farmer or a farm family, an actual farm family, is going through here in the States and worldwide to manage to get food onto your plate, whether you live in Topeka or New York or Chicago or Seattle or any of these places. Remember, if you're eating it, it's come from a farm, most likely. We're following the story of a young man named Cole the Cornstar, this young fellow right here, as he goes through a year's worth of information, of examples, and lets us follow along so that we can know, so that we can understand. And I think it's really important, especially like what you saw at the beginning. This message is equally important because most people don't get it. So why don't we just go ahead and jump right after it, and let's head into it.
I'm now going to lay out the projections that we have going forward into this next crop year. By crop year, I mean from the time that it takes us to plant our seed, raise our seed, harvest our seed, and then sell our harvest. Once our harvest is completely sold, that is a full crop year cycle. Since we don't know what kind of crop year we are going to have, we base all of our beginning of the year projections on historical averages. Cornstar Farms has a historical production yield of 196 bushels per acre for corn and 56 bushels per acre for soybeans. When that's compared to the Iowa 10-year average, which has corn at 195.1 bushels per acre and soybeans at 56.9 bushels per acre, Cornstar Farms raises slightly above average corn and slightly below average soybeans. And by the way, a bushel is a volumetric measurement. This is a bushel basket, and back in the day when they filled it full of corn, it weighed 56 pounds. And when they filled it full of soybeans, it weighed 60 pounds. Therefore, one bushel of corn is 56 pounds of corn, and one bushel of soybeans is 60 pounds of soybeans. And an acre is an area measurement. If you took an NFL football field and went 5-yard line to 5-yard line, the entire width of the field, that is an acre. With our total yields in hand, we can now calculate the farm's projected total gross income, which falls into 4 different categories: crop income, government payments, co-op dividends, and crop insurance. For our crop income projection, historically, we can sell our corn to Cedar Rapids for the highest price and our soybeans to Des Moines for the highest price. So we are going to be using their October future cash prices, which is $4.46 for corn and $11.21 per bushel for soybeans. So if we achieve historical average yields and use these current future prices, we will have a total income of $874 per acre for corn and $628 per acre for soybeans. So if we take that across our 1,000 acres of corn and 1,000 acres of soybeans, we will have $874,000 from our corn and $628,000 from our soybeans. This would be a total gross crop income of $1,501,920. And remember, these are just projections. If we get better yields, we'll make more money. If we get worse yields, we'll make less money.
Not only is it just a projection, all too often people come to a belief that, well, you're making $1.5 million a year, you must be rich. This happens not specifically to farmers, but all too often to any business owner. numbers like that will get reported back, and others who are making less will look down on them because how dare you make that kind of money. Now, again, right now, he's showing you what they're projected. This is a projection. This is a maybe. How many of you go to work with, maybe I'll make this amount of money today, but I can't be sure. But I'm still going to go into work. That's what your farmers are doing. That's what the people who are feeding you are doing every day. I don't know how much I'm going to make. I don't know how much this is worth, but I'm going to continue to do it. And then I'm going to have to be abused by people who don't understand what's coming up because they think I make too much money. Let's continue.
If we get better prices, we'll make more money. If we get worse prices, we'll make less money. So this is where things get really tricky, because is $4.46 and $11.21 a good price? Looking at it now, we don't know. What if the price goes up to $6 and $15? Then we're like, man, why did we lock in a contract at $4.46 and $11.21? We left a bunch of money on the table. But on the flip side of that, what if the price goes down to $3 and $9.50? Then we're like, oh man, we should have pulled the trigger right away and sold everything for $4.46 and $11.21. So this is why marketing is so difficult, and honestly, we are not good at it. We hire EverAg to come in and help us try to make the best sales possible because they are 100 times better at marketing than we are. Just to help build a little context of what incremental price changes can do, for every 25 cents the market goes up for corn, we make an extra $49,000. And for every 50 cents that soybeans goes up, we make an extra $28,000. So this is why getting the top price for our grain and marketing is so important for the farm. And then when it comes to government payments, typically the United States government looks at farmers' income and says, okay, we need you to be here to prevent you from going bankrupt. So if some sort of catastrophic event happens, like a storm that wipes out 2/3 of the state of Iowa, or there's a trade agreement that makes the price of corn and soybeans just dive to unsustainably low levels, the United States government will step in and say, okay, what do we need to do to help get farmers to here to keep them from going bankrupt? And so then a government payment would be issued. Looking into the projections going into this next year, we should not have a government payment. And with the information I'm going to present in a few moments, this may be questioned a little bit, but remember, it is a year behind. So a government payment coming in this year would be based on last year's season, not the season that we are projecting going into now. Another form of income we get is co-op dividends. Over the years, we've bought shares into our local co-op. When they have a good year, they pay out. Some years we don't get anything. Some years we get a pretty good check. So for projection purposes, we are just going to call this $1,000 of co-op dividend income. And then for our last form of farm income, we have crop insurance. Now, just like government payments, crop insurance only kicks in when bad things happen. We are projecting an average year, so in an average year, crop insurance will not kick in, so we are doing a zero payout on crop insurance, and honestly, we want it that way because if we can get our grain in the bin and sell it, we will make more money doing it that way than getting a crop insurance check. So if we have an event later in the year, we'll cover crop insurance then, but for now, we are assuming zero crop insurance income. Now that we've came up with our total projected gross farm income of $1,502,000, we need to project what our expenses are going to be, because this is going to tell us how much money do we actually need to make in order to cover all of our bills. Oh
look, the part that the media never tells you. The same as the people who own a mine, the same as the people who own lumber industries, all those things that they don't tell you.
Call this the break-even point. Our expenses are going to fall into 12 different categories. Now, some of these are fixed, so we know exactly what they're going to be, and other ones are variable. So we are going to be estimating what it was based on historical averages in the past. These are the 12 categories: purchasing equipment, cash rent, chemical seed fertilizer, dues, fuel, insurance, labor, repairs, supplies, trucking, utilities, and operating interest. When it comes to buying equipment, we typically make this decision well in advance, so we know what we are going to be buying going into that year. This year, we are not projecting to buy anything. Our land rent
on the equipment purchase, Cole has been fortunate enough to be in a position where most of their equipment is already bought and paid for, or largely bought and paid for. So there isn't a whole ton of money, but when you consider the price of just the combine, which, and for those who don't know, the big attachment that's on the front of a combine, which sweeps in the plants and gets the fruit thereof, that's a separate cost. But when the cost of a combine easily can come up to $200,000, you can begin to understand how these people who need a combine, if you're starting out, you're going to need a combine, and a new one will cost you, give or take, $200,000. And suddenly you're going to work for an unknown amount of money, slave to everything that's going on, the weather, the politics, the news. Hopefully you have a house, so you have a mortgage on your house, and you have a mortgage on this, and you have a mortgage on that. You're starting to get a clearer picture on what happens to the world's farmers.
Rent is a fixed expense. We farm 2,000 acres and it costs $279 an acre to rent it, so we will pay $558,000 in cash rent. Seed, fertilizer, and chemicals, which are behind me or spread out in the fields, are a fixed cost at $709,000. The dues category, which might as well be called equipment payments, is going to come in at $120,000. Fuel is hard to estimate because we don't know what the price is going to be, but we're going to project $100,000. Trucking is based on how many bushels we raise, so if we raise historical averages, we will spend $83,000 on trucking. As much as we don't like paying the premiums, when we have any problems, we are glad that we have it. So for insurance, we are going to be paying $85,000. Labor can be a little tricky because we have our farm activities and we have off-farm activities. So sometimes some of us are working on the farm and others are doing off-farm stuff. We are only going to be tracking man hours worked on farm activities. So we are going to assume 6,000 man hours, which will come in at $120,000. And then we have another layer of labor, which is our professional fees. So we have things like our attorney, our grain marketing team, Ron, the bulldozer guy, when he comes out and does work. That's gonna come in at $40,000. Repairs and supplies have been absolutely eating us alive for the last couple of years, so I'd really like to get this number down to $100,000 this year. It's gonna be a challenge, but we're gonna see if we can do it. The farm's utility bill for things like electricity, water, our mobile plans comes in at $15,000. And then last but not least, we have, well, it could be least because it's my personal least favorite, we have operating interest, which is a silent thief of profits. Adding up together all of our other projected expenses, we are at $1.9 million. Earlier in the video, when I talked about stipulations, I said that we would be borrowing 80% of our expenses from the bank at a 9% interest rate. $1.9 million at an 80% borrow rate is $1.5 million. So we will be borrowing $1.5 million from the bank at a 9% interest rate. Now, here's the thing. We're not going to be borrowing all $1.5 million day one upfront, paying 9% of $1.5 million for the entire year. The first month, we may take out $100,000. Next month, maybe another $100,000. Third month, maybe $400,000. So each month that goes by, that number that we are borrowing just keeps going up and up and up until the end of the year, where we are at our $1.5 million. So the calculation is not as simple as just 1.5 million times 9%, which is $139,000. So I'm going to use a 70% multiplier. So basically saying 70% of the year, we're basically going to be borrowing that money. So $139,000 times 70% is $97,000. So I project we are going to spend $97,000 in operating interest. Adding all 12 categories together, our total expenses is projected to be $2,027,000 compared to our projected income of $1,502,920. That brings us up. Oh man, I can't believe this is what things are projecting to be. That brings us to a projected loss of $523,800 $580. I triple checked all of my numbers. I don't believe this either, but $523,000 projected loss going into the season. That is as bad as I have ever seen it. There is two reasons why this massive deficit is being projected. It is the price of corn and soybeans and the expenses going into raising them. So the price of corn and soybeans last year, corn was $6. Now it is $4.46. Soybeans last year were $13. Now they're $11.21. But I don't really think the price is necessarily our problem, because over the last 10 years, a $4.46 and an $11.21 is not a bad price to be at. Between 2014 and 2020, the average price of corn was $3.59 a bushel, and the average price of soybeans was $9.54 a bushel. So $4.46 and $11.21 are well above that, so I don't necessarily think that that is fully to blame, because those are relatively good prices. The problem arises on the expenses end of things. Here's the way farming works. Commodity prices and expenses pretty much go hand in hand. So when commodity prices are low, expenses stay down with them. But when commodity prices start to go up, expenses go up with it. So what we had happen 2014 to 2020, everything expense-wise pretty much stayed flat because the price of grain was pretty much flat. But once we hit 2021, the price of corn went from $3.50 to $6, and beans went from 10 to 14, and all of a sudden all of the expenses just shot up. Fertilizer more than tripled, chemicals tripled, interest rates doubled, parts doubled, diesel fuel doubled, seed went up 10%, and rent went from $219 an acre to $279 an acre. So our total cost of production almost doubled, going from 2020 into 2022. As much as we didn't like the expenses going up and up and up, the price of grain was staying up there with it. So we could afford to pay our bills. It wasn't fun, but we had the revenue there from the crops that we generated to be able to pay those triple, double up whatever percentage expenses. Now what we're running into now is chemicals. They basically halved once they tripled. Fertilizer halved once it tripled, but almost everything else has stayed exactly where it was. So we have super elevated expenses relative to what the price of grain is right now. So that is what is causing us to have this massive projected deficit. And the thing that kind of stinks is there is not a whole lot we can do. Whatever the market is going to do is what the market is going to do. The only thing we can control is when we make the sale. So we try to time things for when things are at a high price. So EverAg is going to help us take care of that. We can control our expenses, so don't buy anything that we don't need. We will try our hardest to raise as much yield as we possibly can, but there's only so many variables that we can control when it comes to that. And then on these past couple good years that we've had, if we have some extra money sitting over, we basically have to be willing to cough that up and say, okay, well, we're showing a loss and we made some profits, so we may have to rob Peter to pay Paul to keep us going. And those are really our only options. I'll be honest, these numbers are not fun to look at because I know how much effort is going to go into raising this crop, and when you're taking all this time, effort, lack of sleep, frustration, and just overall work, and you're projecting a $500,000 loss, like you're not even doing it for free. You're paying to do this work. I don't like looking at it, but these are just projections. So we do need to keep that in mind. Prices can always go up. Yields can always be better. But at the same time, yields can always be worse and prices can always go down. So this is what we are facing for an economic projection going into this next farming year. I understand that everything I just talked about is like drinking through a fire hose. There is a lot of information. My job by the end of this series is to make all of this information fun, digestible, and easy to understand. So
Alrighty. You know, honestly, these are the things that none of us consider. Some guy on a tractor rolling through a field, you can have a thought on what that is, what that means. You can fetishize it. You can turn it into something completely that it's not. But these are the realities. These are the realities of actual farmers that it doesn't matter if they raise corn or soybeans or wheat or peas or cows. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's on the continental US, if it's in North America, Central America. It doesn't matter if it's in Europe. These are the situations that farmers face. And I thought it was really important for us to be able to kind of stop and think about it. Follow along. Guys, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to stick them down below, and I will do my best to answer them. And I think next time we're going to just get into the meat and potatoes and get the ball rolling. So until then, everybody, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you then.